What's up, Planeswalkers? It's your boy K-Dog. Another fun video for you guys. This one we got a Mardu list in Standard. Revenge is a Promise. So this is kind of a janky burn list that's centered around Revival Revenge. The Revival side you can ignore. Doesn't really have a whole lot of value for us. There are some niche scenarios where you could use it because we can return a creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. We are running Kroxa and Bonecrusher Giant, so potentially you could use it for those, but really we're just looking for the Revenge side. 6 mana sorcery, 4 white and black. Double your life total, and target opponent loses half their life, rounded up. So we're trying to, it's very much a red-based deck, splashing white and black for this card, and just kind of trying to use red removal burn spells to kind of control the early game. As little as you need to stay alive, and hopefully as much as possible try to aim those burn spells at your opponent. But if you do need to hit your opponent's creatures and slow them down so you can get to 6 mana to get this revenge off, we do have ways of replaying those spells from our graveyard and getting some additional value there. Obviously the Rakdos burn list was pretty popular for a while, so it's a little bit of a throwback to that. There was kind of a 1000-Year Storm deck that used Revenge as a win condition, which is pretty janky. We're not doing anything that crazy. This is kind of more of a straightforward burn list. Revenge to get your opponent's life total down even lower, and then just kind of use a Slaying Fire or something like that to do the last points of damage. So we're just kind of using Revenge as kind of a big burn spell, if you will, while also kind of getting us life as well. So we can kind of stabilize if our opponent's threatening, potentially lethal. We just Revenge, gain a bunch of life, and just kind of defeat your opponent's morale, if you will. Alright, so we're running all 4 copies of Shock, of course. 3 copies of Lava Coil. It only hits creatures, but we do need ways to kind of deal with creatures in the early game. A couple of Scorching Fires for flexibility to hit creatures or planeswalkers. We're already in the 3 copies of Kroxa, is another way to kind of deal damage, and also just having a 6/6 body is pretty reasonable, and then that little bit of discard effect can be nice against certain matchups as well. Bonecrusher Giant, just obviously really good magic card. We can stomp for 2 damage to any target, and we can just get a 4/3 down. It's one of our few creatures here, just with Kroxa, so sometimes just hit your opponent's face, do that 2 little points of damage, then get it down as a 4/3, and kind of slow your opponent's attack a little bit, because we are just kind of trying to buy some time to get to the Revenge stage. We can kind of do that, gain some life back, and kind of put the game out of reach for our opponent. So Light Up the Stage, just a really good card draw effect, because we do have 6 mana spells like Revenge and some other cards that have pretty decent X spells in them. You're not going to play this your first chance. You're going to kind of save this when you're kind of empty-handed, and once you have 4 or 5 lands already in play to kind of dig, so that no matter what you draw with this, you should be able to cast it. So ideally you'll want to wait until you can cast 6 mana spells, is kind of the main way of using this. Obviously if you're just kind of hurting for those additional land draws, you can just cast this anyways and you kind of dig for those lands, but you want to try to be able to cast things as consistently as possible with this. So unlike the mono red list that you may have seen, we're not casting this the first chance we get. We're kind of waiting until we're ready to cast this. Additional card draw and burn risk factor, just such a powerhouse in this style of deck. Instant speed for 3 mana, target opponent gets to choose to either take 4 damage or let us draw 3 cards, and it has a jump start, so we can just discard a card and then recast the cost for 3 mana again, and get the same effect. So it's a really powerful card in our deck. Just a couple copies of Skewer the Critics. We don't have a ton of ways of really dealing direct damage, especially if we're turning those burn spells at our opponent's creatures just to kind of slow them down. So Skewer the Critics is not always relevant, but just having the potential to cast it for spectral cost and deal 3 damage to any target, even if it is at sorcery speed, is just a really good magic card. So we're just running a couple copies. Slaying Fire, though, here is the real all-star. We are obviously running 3 colors, but we have such a heavy red base that we should be able to consistently cast this for its adamant cost to deal 4 damage to any target, and 3 mana instant speed. That makes this just a really good magic card. A couple copies of Purphoros' Intervention. Usually we're just here for a removal spell to do twice X damage to creature or planeswalker. So just kind of more planeswalker interaction in our main deck. But also could be a finisher to make an X1 red elemental creature token with trample and haste. So in that way, it's just kind of a X burn spell. And then Finale of Promise is how we get some of those cards back. For X red sorcery speed, we can cast up to one target instant and or sorcery from our graveyard with converted mana cost X or less without paying their mana cost. If you do get to X10 or more, you get to copy those spells twice and choose new targets for the copies. By that time, we'll probably have already either won or lost the game, so that's not really too relevant. So we're just kind of looking to cast this usually like on turn 5 or 6. Obviously, Skewer the Critics and Light Up the Stage, even though you're trying to cast them for their spectral cost, for the purpose of Finale, they do cost 3 mana. So typically you're going to need to pay X is 3, and then we get Slain Fire, which unfortunately does not trigger Adamant, so it is only going to deal 3 damage. So that is a little bit of a downside there, but it's still a way to get back your instants. And then we also need kind of a balance of sorcery, so it's one of the reasons that kind of have Skewer the Critics in here. So you can kind of get Slain Fire and Skewer the Critics back, for example. You can get your risk factor back, just kind of whatever you need. Finale of Promise is a way for us to kind of play out these shocks in the early turns, kill your opponent's creatures, or even just deal damage to their face, hit planeswalkers, whatever the case may be. And then Finale just lets you get extra value off of them. So just a really good card, and since we're so instant and sorcery based, it pretty much works with everything in our deck. There's pretty some jank scenarios where you can Finale for Revival or Revenge, but that doesn't happen very often. I think I've only done it once in all the times I've played this deck, but it is pretty fun if it does happen. So going over the mana base here, we do want to make sure we have at least one basic of the Plains and Swamp, 7 Mountains, because we are just very red heavy, and then 4 Blood Crypt, 4 Temple of Malice, 4 Sacred Foundry, and 4 Temple of Triumph. So not running the white and black lands, since we are just red focused, we're just kind of splashing the white and the black, so that's why just the red and shock and scry lands. So going over the sideboard real quick, I do want some kind of instant speed artifact or enchantment hate, so a couple copies of Agonizing Remorse, so we can kind of 2 mana destroy Embercleave during combat. 3 copies of Agonizing Remorse for some hand disruption against those mid-rangey decks. A couple copies of Banishing Light, just since it is 1 white mana, it's going to be reasonably castable here for us, and then just being able to answer any non-land permanent on our opponent's side. Pharika's Libation is another way to kind of deal with enchantments, especially things like Thassa, the enchantment creatures, things like that, and also a way as a way to get around hexproof. A couple copies of Tibalt. Obviously, we don't want our opponents gaining life because we are essentially a burn deck, just kind of a janky, almost kind of a combo version. Anything we can do to kind of slow our opponents down from gaining life, Tibalt is going to help us do that. We're not playing a ton of creatures, so we do need some way to kind of clear the board. Shatter the Sky. That 2 white is can be a little tricky sometimes, but we can definitely get there, and it's obviously much more reasonable than expecting double white and double black for like a Kaya's Wrath. And Storm's Wrath kind of makes more sense with our mana base, but doesn't necessarily hit everything, so we do want some Shatter the Skies so we can just destroy every single creature. And then a couple copies of Chandra. She's also kind of a burn spell in a way, as we can +2 to give our opponent an emblem that deals 1 damage to them on their upkeep. And it's also just an all-star against the control deck since it can't be countered. And then it's also got these fantastic removal options for -3 to deal 3 damage to each non-elemental creature token, so it's kind of a board wipe unless you're playing elementals. Otherwise you can just -X to deal X damage to a creature or a planeswalker, and that creature or planeswalker is exiled. So Chandra's just a fantastic spell against those control and sort of mid-rangey matchups. Alright, so we'll jump into some standard best of 3, and let's see if we can make this deck work. Just the idea of revenge and just gaining a ton of life back while having your opponent's life total. Just thought like it was a really fun idea, and just kind of build it around kind of a mono red burn based list. So even if your opponent is like on mono white life gain, they gain a ton of life. Well, they just lose half of that life in one fell swoop. So it's pretty satisfying. All right, so we do have our black and we have our whites. We have some nice early interaction. I guess we'll just do start with our Sacred Foundry here. See what our opponent has up against King Edge 34. Okay, blacks, there you go. Alright, we'll just play Blood Crypt and hold up shock. Let's keep getting these shock lands down while we can. Okay, so we're going Golgari. There's a Finale. Let's get all our shock lands down without having to pay life. Let's see what our opponent is up to. Okay, Omen of the Hunts. And grab another land. Let's see if they're running a third color or if they're just a straight Golgari kind of mid-rangey control list. Okay, another black source. Alright, so we are up to 4. So don't necessarily feel confident casting Light Up the Stage just yet, but we do have the shock into Light Up the Stage play next turn if we want. And anything with 3 or toughness or less, we can just Scorching Dragonfire. Fine Broker gets nothing, sure. Kroxa. Graveyard is empty because they haven't given us any targets. Kroxa is still probably a reasonable play here. We can also still light up the stage. If they take 3 damage, we can also light up the stage and still hang on to our shock. So we'll see what they do here. They do pitch a land. Go ahead and Spectacle. We are the 6 mana range. I have Revenge next turn. That's pretty sweet. Well, let's go and light up the stage again. Why not? Skewer. Now's a good time as any. Skewer their face. 4 toughness from Fine Broker. It's only attacking for 3 and we're at 20 and we're about to Revenge next turn, so really not too worried about that. So we have the Swamp in hand, but we have the Plains that will go to exile if we don't play it next turn, so we'll just go Plains into Revenge. And our opponent's going to go down to 7. We're taking at least 3 here down to 17, but then we'll gain... we'll double our life total and go up to 34. And then we've got the Finale play, as well as Shock. So obviously Kroxa and Finale are a little bit of a non-bow, so something you kind of have to balance a little bit, depending on the game state. Okay, Temple's okay. Just go for the Revenge. Our opponent's down to 7. And then next turn we can Shock plus Finale. Let's see, Shock puts him down to 5. And yeah, Finale can get the Shock that we just cast, and then the Skewer the Critics. Let's have some life gain here. Shock. X equals 3. Okay, Shock will be our instant, and Skewer will be our sorcery. Auto pay. Shock first. Skewer. Okay. Well, that went much better than I expected it to. And that's kind of the dream scenario. Your opponent doesn't really do a whole lot, and you can just save your burn spells. Alright, so they're in Golgari. Fine Broker, Murderous Rider. You know, we're not playing a ton of creatures, so it's fine by me if you got all that removal spells in your hand. Banishing Light seems pretty good. It's like they're just kind of a mid-rangey, kind of a control list. I'm not sure what Fine Broker is for, since I didn't see any self-mill, but they could be running like Myra Triton, Glowspore Shaman, stuff like that. We just didn't happen to draw into it. I mean, if they have removal, we're not too worried about hitting their hand with the Agonizing Remorse. Obviously, Bonecrusher Giant isn't as good against their removal. I guess we just take all of them out and maybe throw in a Chandra, just because she's really good. Exile effect can hit them pretty hard. 3 damage to all creatures. Does not hit the Finebroker, but Murderous Rider, things like that. Hand's not amazing, but seems reasonable, so yeah, keep. Yeah, definitely leading with the Scryland. I think we'll actually bottom that. Already have 3 more lands in hand. I'm sure we'll draw into more, so let's just dig for more action. We could shock in here for Kroxa. Might not be bad. Yeah, let's go for it. It seemed like they were very aggressive last game, so let's just go ahead and shock in. Don't mind taking a little bit of life here. And then we can play a Blood Crypt next turn. Tapped, and then we'll still have the Dragonfire open if they play, depending on what they play here. Okay, Wolfalo Haven. Okay, just keep playing these guys out. So they are running Glowspore Shaman, sure. Revenge of Ravens. Well, that's fine by me. I mean, it is a 3-powered creature. Gives us an excuse to use up the Dragonfire, so let's go and fire it off. Banishing Light. And we even have white mana to play it. That's beautiful. Alright, so we'll just play the Blood Crypt tapped, and just probably risk factor on their end step. I don't think they're going to play anything too scary. We need to worry about Slaying Fire, but we'll see. Golgari Locket. Okay. Well, they're tapped out, so we're going to fire off the risk factor. They're at 21, so they might just take 4. Either way, it works for me. Yep. Another Blood Crypt. We do need to get up to 6 lands. I'm not interested necessarily in discarding 1 to cast another risk factor. Since it's 17, they probably just take 4 again. Whatever permanent they play here, we can just Banish and Light it. So if it's like a Vraska, or if it's another creature. Revenge of Ravens we don't care about at all. We're not attacking their life total. Obnixilis, okay. Does not have any creatures to destroy, so that's fine. It is going to ping us.
Suffer the dreams of the damned.
Revenge. You know, I'm not worried about Obnixilis. Let's go ahead and fire off the Revenge while we're at it. We're up to 34, so this Obnixilis can ping us as much as it wants to. And we'll just save the Banishing Light for any creatures that might be threatening. The Murderous Rider is going to gain him some life, so we may want to answer that. Erebos. Okay, so we'll Skewer the Critics. Well, Erebos, definitely want to get rid of that. And to hang on to the Slaying Fire. Don't want them gaining life, so I think we'll go ahead and fire off the Skewer on the Murderous Rider. They get it back in their library, but it goes to the bottom, so I'm not worried about that. We are basically a burn deck, so we want to minimize any chances of them for getting life back. Like that. Leyline Prowler is pretty decent. So you're running Erebos and Nylea. That's pretty greedy. You want Black Devotion and... okay, so we're still not worried about Obnixilis. We don't have creatures for them to... Again, we don't want them gaining life, so I think we'll go ahead and fire this off on the Leyline Prowler. Just have no chance to gain life. Don't love leaving Nylea out there, but I'm not really sure if she does enough against us, so we'll leave it for now. They're a long ways from Devotion, so definitely not worried about that. But it is going to give them some nice card selection. But we have a Banishing Light for when they finally do find something. We are at 6 lands, so any lands we draw after here, we can definitely pitch to the risk factor. We also have Kroxa. But they can just destroy that with Ob Nixilis. I'm just going to just fire it off now. And see what they do. If we do find another, if they do go let us draw cards, we can potentially fire off this Kroxa. So Ob Nixilis is going to ping us, but we're at 28, so not terribly concerned. We have 2 cards in hand, so let's Kroxa. 1, 2, 3, 4. And they can destroy it with the Ob Nixilis, but then we'll draw some cards. And we'll get rid of 1 card out of their hand. A land, okay, they're down to 5. That's pretty dangerous territory for them. And we still have the Banishing Light. Okay, Erstwhile Trooper. It's kind of a fun casual card, I guess. Yep, going for the Ob Nixilis, destroying Kroxa. Let us draw a couple of cards. Okay.
Try not to think too hard.
We do have the Purphoros Intervention. Okay, they find an Ob Nixilis Cruelty. Yeah, you got a lot of removal for somebody who's not playing creatures. That's pretty cool. Okay, let's do some math here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we can play a land. And X would be 7. They chump block 2, but then we trample over for 5, and that's game. Just for fun, we could just revenge again, but usually that's not the smartest way to play. If you have an opportunity to win, then just win. X7, everything's highlighted. Auto pay. Okay, 7-1 trample haste. You're empty-handed. You can block there, but we're going to trample over for 5, and good game. Block 2. Still take 5 on the trample. Sweet. Alright, so obviously that was kind of the dream scenario for this deck. You know, once you get to sideboard, though, you do have some nice answers. It is fairly resilient, even if your opponent is playing a lot of creatures in the early turns, which this deck, which our opponent was not. We still have some nice resiliency to kind of answer those early creatures, and then the finale can kind of allow us to replay those. And then the revenge, even if we go down to like, 10 or 8, just be able to revenge, get back up to, 16, 14, whatever. Gives us some nice breathing room. And, we're running 3 copies of that, so we're definitely going to find it. Most of the time, we're going to find it in time. And then, red obviously has some very efficient removal spells with Lava Coil, Scorching Dragonfire, things like that. And then if we need to, we can go to our sideboard to get Banishing Lights and some board wipes. So, yeah, overall, it's it's kind of a fun casual deck. You could play it in ranked. It's pretty decent. Obviously, it's going to struggle against like some of the mono red list and some of the really top tier ones, but it's mostly just kind of a fun casual deck. That was kind of the dream scenario where your opponent isn't too threatening early on, and then you can kind of save your burn spells for when you need them the most. Yeah, you can so you guys saw the power level of what the deck is capable of. The revenge obviously put in some work. Finale put in some work. Kroxa is obviously pretty fun as well. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I hope to see you in the next one. Take care.